The only problem we got when we have that many kids is we need to start working on our adult class so that way we can at least outnumber the kids, right? That's how Brother Hay looks at it. Sometimes we need our help, right? And I used to think when I was teaching school, you got 20 little guys and one teacher. I used to think, man, if they ever revolted together, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Everybody thinks, well, they're just little kids. Well, you get 20 little ones on you, you might be shocked what they could do if they joined forces. So, but it is good to see everybody tonight. Remember those that are not here. I imagine Brother Singletary's still working out of town. Randy and Sharon hadn't been here for a while. We need to remember them in prayer. And we're going to finish our Bible study tonight. We're all the way down to number 4. If you're watching by Facebook or YouTube, we want to say welcome to you tonight, and we're glad you're with us. And how many are still glad to see Leo's home? I just want you to know who's happier. Right, Eileen? And the baby. And the baby. She's like, I don't know about you guys. But Brother Hay is glad that you guys are here tonight. We're going to be talking about that, and I know that the very last statement as we're finishing up, it says we must not let this life overwhelm us. And before we get into number 4, I just want to remind you, there's a lot of craziness still going on, right? How many know the election's over, but that's just the beginning? And now we got all the other things that go along with it. And I was thinking about that today and all the stuff that they're doing, and we're in that transition period now for a while until everything kind of settles in a little bit. But here's what I want you to know. Don't let life overwhelm you. I told Larry today when we were working at Jonathan's, I said, man, it's been rough already. First thing started out this morning, for whatever reason, I started transposing numbers. I do that every once in a while, and I was having trouble. Sister Ray told me, just don't read my tape measure. I said, but it's not 1 o'clock yet. Usually the rule is after 1, I don't use the tape measure. Some reason my tape measure is just rowdy, and after 1 o'clock, it just is inaccurate. I don't know what happens to it. I do know it's Brother Hay gets tired. But anyway, I was thinking about that sometimes. But, yeah, I needed to be watched today. But it started early this morning. But I just want you to think about it. I know, even like Tyler, he's getting ready to face a lot of things in his life. He's getting ready to graduate. He's going into a crazy world right now. But you know what? God's got this. And in the midst of everything, we need to understand is we got to be calm. And one of the things that I thought a lot about this morning, and I just want to mention it before we get started, how many know we can be stressed without being de-stressed? Or distressed. I almost pronounced that word wrong. That's horrible. Without being distressed. Think about this. How many times have you been under a lot of stress, but all of a sudden when we just get overwhelmed, it's a whole different level, right? And Jesus had that happen. And people always say, well, when did that happen to Jesus? Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane when he went to pray and he came back and everybody was asleep? And he told them, hey, you guys need to wake up and pray with me. He went back and come back. They sleeping again, Fred? He had a hard time that night. He went so far as to say, look, Father, is there any way for this to pass, right? But even though we might be distressed, remember who's on our side. Remember who's walking with you. And there's nothing you can do about stress in your life. I'll just be honest with you. It's part of life, okay? Sometimes stress comes from the simplest things. Have you ever burned your toast? And then all of a sudden that could be a stressful thing, right? In Brother Hayes' case, if you switch numbers around, that could be really stressful. It's okay unless you're cutting a $20 board and cut it wrong. Then it's not good, okay? But I learned a long time ago that one of the things that we have to understand is that in the midst of all this craziness, remember who's on our side. And one of the things that we have to learn is to have this thing called contentment. How many agree with me it's hard to be content? You can always find something wrong. You can always find something that somebody's aggravating you about. I know I've been dealing with some stuff with Irving, and I thought I had it all worked out, and then I got a letter a couple of days ago, and the letter didn't match what the lady told me, and immediately I thought, oh, this could get out of hand quick. And I didn't even bother. I haven't even answered or called the person for 3 days. And somebody said, well, why'd you do that, bro? Hey, because let's just say I wasn't in the right mindset to call somebody. and what I learned was over the years is sometimes we got to take a step back. If you're struggling in your life and things are going crazy, sometimes you just got to stop. Look, you're going to have a lot of people telling you what to do. I can't even imagine being a senior in high school. Imagine all the advice that Tyler's getting. I mean, he's probably got teachers. He's got parents. He's got church people. He's got everybody that you can imagine telling him what he needs to do. I used to always tell our seniors every year the same thing. You need to get alone with God. You need to pray. And you need to ask God, she's fine. Don't be distressed. And don't even be stressed. She's good. I promise. Bray does not have an issue. But I think about those kind of things because when the stress goes to that next level and we become in distress, that's a whole different thing. And how hard is it to be content? You know, no matter who you are, how many think you got just enough money, you're okay. You got all the money you need. Nobody raised their hand. I wonder why. Oh, Kaylee did. You know why Kaylee raises her hand? Eileen knows. She thinks Dad's a bank. I told one of my kids that one time. You know what they told me? A couple of windows and a couple of doors. Yeah, you kind of do look like a bank. I thought, oh, isn't that just kind of cute, right? But we can't get rid of the stress, but we can keep it from going to that next level and learn that sometimes we have to be content. And that contentment is really one of those areas where the enemy works. He's always going to poke you. He's going to always tell you, you need to do this. You should have this. I remember someone told me one time, they said, well, why can't I have this, this, and this? They weren't working. You all not going to like Bro Hayes' answer to him. You know what I told him? Well, if you got a job, you could have some of those things. Oh, man, they didn't talk to me for a long time. But anyway, how many know it's true, right? Isn't it reality, Bro Randy? You know, if you don't want to work and you don't want to do those kind of things, hey, don't be mad at somebody else if they're working and taking care of business. And so I look at those kind of things, and I don't care who you are, you got to be careful because the enemy plays in this. And sometimes people are going to get mad at you. They're not going to be justified. I have this thing where lots of times people tell me stuff, and I always tell them the same thing. Well, I don't know about that. I never saw that. And it makes them angry with Brother Hay. But how many know we got to be careful because we give things life that don't need to have life, and our words have life. I happen to believe that with a passion, and I think we got to be careful. And sometimes we can all have an opinion about everything in the world. And I watched somebody the other day, and, you know, they were cutting their hair and saying all this crazy stuff, and I thought, wow, all that over an election. You know, I'm thinking, really, some things are just crazy, right? But do you know I've known people who went and got tattoos because they got mad at somebody? I'm just telling you. But once that tattoo's on them, guess what? Yeah, that's not coming off. So you do got to be careful what you do. Does that make sense? Because how many know we overreact? And when we overreact, that's what gets us in trouble. You know, somebody can say something, and if we take it wrong, and they might not have meant it that way, if we overreact, how many know it gets out of control fast? So I want you to understand that life can be tough, but don't let it overwhelm you. And sometimes it don't matter. Brother Hayes been doing this for a very, very long time. Sometimes you got to take a step back, take a deep breath, and say, okay, Lord, I need a reset. Okay? And it don't matter who you are. We just have to have those moments sometimes. When I was in the military working on airplanes, if some of them pilots saw half the stuff we did, I'd be in so much trouble. But, you know, we go out and they'd be having a problem with the airplane. I'd have them shut down an engine. I'd take a box out. I'd bang the box on the ground and put the box back in. And all of a sudden the systems start working. And I'd ask the guy, I said, hey, he said, man, I don't know what you did, but it's really working. Do you know I never told him what I did? Can you imagine if he knew what Brother Hay did to fix it? Now, you're talking about old equipment. So when I banged that box on the ground to reset the circuit cards, you got to understand it's a different time, okay? But here's the deal. That system that Brother Hay's talking about, when they got up to altitude, you know what they did? They would ring that thing in. They'd fly that airplane 200 feet off the ground using that system. Imagine if they really knew what Brother Hay did. Never had an incident, in case you're wondering over that. But I just want you to understand that sometimes if we knew the fix, we wouldn't accept it anyway. And so when we're talking about the things we've been talking about for the last few weeks, and we did last week, we started talking about sometimes it's not hard. But here's where we're at. It says we must continue to move forward even if everyone else walks away. As a result of this, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. And that's in John chapter 6, verse 66 and 67. So Jesus said to the 12, the ones that were with him, you do not want to go away also, do you? And I want you to think about this. Jesus understands what it's like to have people walk out on you. Think about that for a minute. You know, there's this big crowd, Jesus like the hero, right? And all of a sudden, because he starts teaching some hard truths. And guess what happens when you start teaching hard truths? People don't like to hear that. When Brother Hay says, hey, man, let's do the hard thing. Let's love our enemies, right? We all like the easy stuff. We can love those that are nice to us. But that crossover into the hard stuff, right? That gets tough. And Kaylee and I were doing our thing in the morning, and, you know, Sister A has to have her coffee, and Tanya. And Kaylee's got to have her donut. So, you know, there's certain things that you have to do before my day. I always tell Larry, hey, we can't start till 9:30 because I got to get the girls gone, and I have to make sure they have their coffee and donuts before they leave. And what would happen if I skipped a day getting the coffee? Oh, no answer. Did you notice how everything went quiet? Yeah. But what happened today is we got to the donut shop, and one of the people that have been out in the streets and living and usually goes in there and gets coffee. If I go in there, I try and make sure he has enough money to buy him some donuts and stuff, and the people in there are pretty good. I don't know what happened today, but the police had them. And I thought to myself, it broke my heart. Because, you know, some people's only interaction with other human beings is not good. How many think he's already pretty down on his luck? Probably the last thing he needed was to be harassed at that moment in time. They let him go, so I'm sure they ran him, and he didn't have no warrants or anything like that, so he was okay, and they let him go. And I watched, and he had went and sat down somewhere, and I thought to myself, that's kind of how Jesus was feeling right here. People just have a tendency to walk away. And sometimes when you're doing the right thing, it will cost you family. I hate to tell you this, it'll cost you friends sometimes. It definitely causes you to lose colleagues. And there are people that will look at you differently. Is that a nice way of saying it? And I used to always tell the guys at work and the ones that were Christians, and over the years, they would always say things to me, well, how can you do this? And I'd always tell them the same thing. I said, do you know that a lot of people, the only connection they'll ever have with God is you? I want you to think about that. Okay, some of those kids where Tyler goes to school, the only connection they're ever going to have with God will be him. You say, what do you mean that by that, Brother Hay? How he lives his life. I see you, beautiful. How he lives his life will have a direct impact on him. If he gets out of control or gets angry or something like that, how many know things change? So I look at that kind of stuff and I understand that even at work, how many know when things are going bad, how many know how tempted it is just to go along to get along? But sometimes it's not the right thing. And sometimes you have to stand up, Fred. And we're coming to a point in our society and in our country where people have to start standing up. But do you know what I've noticed just since last week? All of a sudden, I notice a lot more people aren't afraid to say they're Christians. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that they're not afraid to stand up for what they know is right. All of a sudden, I'm seeing people stand up and go, look, I'm sorry, but men can't have babies, okay? All of a sudden, I'm seeing a lot more people that are willing to do those things. Anybody know why? It's because of leadership. When the leader can take a stand, then how many know it's a whole lot easier? Now, this is going to shock you, but each one of us is a leader in this life to someone else. It could be one of the little children that come to church, right? It could be somebody that you come in contact with. And even if you're having a bad day, you can put a smile on your face. One of Veronica's little girls, I always laugh because I always tell her, she always does this. She tries to be so mean. She always gives me this big old frown like whatever, right? And she's trying to really get me, Fred. And here's all I ever say to her. Whatever you do, don't smile. And the next thing you know, man, she gets a big old smile on her face, and she's so happy. How many know if Brother Hay came in, and I did not say that to her, what do you think she'd start thinking? You think she might start thinking, you're absolutely right. I wonder if Brother Hay's mad at me. I wonder if he's pushing me away. What if she had a bad day at home, Fred? What if she had a bad day at school? And all of a sudden, something so simple. And what I'm trying to get across to you as we try to finish up this little Bible study is there are always those that are going to walk away, even in a church. You know, one time, this is going to sound crazy, but it's a fact. Do you know lots of times large churches, they're just like little churches. They have a lot of people gone every week. But if you have 4,000 people that attend, how many know you could have 1,500 people missing and it's not making it look bad, right? And one time I got a letter from a large church. They were wanting, actually what they wanted us to do was let all the kids from here come to their church. And Brother Hayes, one of those guys, said, nope, we'll keep our kids right here. But they sent me a letter and give me a report, Brother Randy, of their year. When they started in this letter, they said, well, we had, I forget how many now, it was 3,000 or 4,000 people saved. Their attendance was about 1,500 at the beginning of the year. Anybody want to guess what their attendance was at the end of the year? 1,500. Anybody like Brother Hay go, that math don't add up? If 4,000 people got saved, what happened to them all? Right? Do you see what Brother Hay is getting at? Sometimes you got to be careful because things look one way and they might not necessarily be that way. How many know in a little church, Brother Hay can name you 10 people without even stressing right now that's usually here that's not here, even on Wednesday night. When I go home, I'll make sure I pray for them. And, honey, she's fine. You're just worried. She's okay. Sometimes she's got to get her opinion out because she's a girl. If you make her kind of quench her style there, we'll all be in trouble. That's how she grows. But I want you to think with Brother Hay. In a smaller church, there's a lot more accountability, right? Okay? I don't always do it, but I try my best. If I don't see Fred, it might take me a couple of days or a week, but I try to text him. If I don't see him for a while, I go, man, I hadn't seen Fred. I need to text him. Now, I'm not very good at that, and I'm not as good as I used to be, because guess what happens, Brother Randy? It's called life. It's called circumstances. And all of a sudden, when things start going crazy, we forget it's the little things that make a difference. We need to keep each other in contact. And so when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, and what Jesus said is really interesting. He said, hey, are you going to go away too? Pastors feel like that a lot. They go through up and downs in the church, and you can have a bunch of people, and then you kind of lose some, and then you get some, and you lose some, and things change. And how many know since COVID, everything's crazy? And there's a lot of people who don't want to come because they're afraid. And I will tell you that I love being able to put this out on Facebook and YouTube, but it'll never take the place of being here in person. I'm telling you, we need to get back to having people in person. It's vital, because what we need is what that little girl needs when she sees somebody. Whatever you do, don't smile. I bet sometimes Brother Randy's got a million reasons not to smile. But all of a sudden, because somebody noticed her, she can't help but smile, because she said, okay, I might as well give in because he ain't going to quit. Oh, it sounds like Haley. Kind of, but a different one. And I know Sister Hay and I had a meeting the other day for Kaylee and Tanya, and it lasted for 4 hours. I've never had one of those last but about an hour for both the girls. It was such a long thing, and come to find out, the lady that came lost her husband 2 weeks ago. How many know all of a sudden things change in that situation? How many know you got to have some compassion? How about a little concern? Might not know who they are, but how many know we all, like Brother Hay said, go through a lot of stress? And if we're not careful, we let that stress turn us into distress. And when you get distressed, it's a lot worse. I mean, you just going to have some stress in your life. You can't help it. And I want you to understand, the word, it just can be hard, because I have that example at the bottom where he says, I say unto you, love your enemies and bless them that curse you, be good to them that hate you, and them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And again, serving God is so interesting in Brother Hay. We're so surface sometimes, and we don't want to get to the hard stuff. The hard stuff takes effort. Do you know the difference between an NFL football player and an average guy? They put a lot of work in. Lots of work. You know what? You can have two people with the same amount of talent, and one person puts in the work, Fred, and one doesn't. I'm always amazed when they talk about the people that ice skate. Now, I used to love to skate when I was young, and I will tell you, it can be kind of hard to do that and taxing on your body and things like that. But I'm just telling you, I never liked skating enough, Brother Randy, to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go spend 2.5 hours on ice somewhere. How many know I never was able to get to the NHL as a hockey player? You know why? I would have never put the work in, right? And sometimes when Brother Hay was in the military, people get mad at me and they go, well, if you get a promotion, how many know sometimes to get those promotions, you got to do a lot of work? You know, one of my favorite things was on our test for your career field, the average, your job knowledge, the average score in Brother Hay's job was around 40. That's not even passing. It's 40 out of 100. And it's stuff you do every day. Well, I will tell you that the test's a lot different than everyday stuff to a certain extent. But here's the deal. People would always be complaining, and then you ask them, well, how much did you study? Well, I didn't have time. Okay. But you had time to go do these 10 things, right? And I remember Sister Hay sometimes would get so mad at me, I'd get my book out. I'd be studying. They'd be wanting me to do something else. I'd be like, well, I really need to do this. And then all of a sudden the test come out. Guess what, Brother Randy? I got promoted, and a lot of people didn't. And one time I was working in a special place, and it was kind of funny. It was pretty much E5s. All of us just about were E5s. One guy had been an E5, been in like 14, 15 years. I was a young guy, and we're testing for E6 or tech sergeant. You know what we did a lot of times while we were waiting for airplanes and stuff, while the airplanes off flying? We played a lot of pinochle, Fred. I didn't even know how to play pinochle until I got to that job. They taught me. And I was like, huh. But it came time to get ready for the test. And then they get mad at me because they say, aren't you playing with us tonight? I go, no, I need to go over here and study a little bit. And sometimes they'd be really berating you and giving you a hard time, right? And I'd be like, okay. And then when the results came out, I was the only one that made tech. So all of a sudden, all them guys that were my boss, I just became their boss the next day. It was funny. But anyway, I kind of like that, right? But here's what I want to tell you. How many know Christians are like that? We want our blessings, right? We want God to be in our life. But I want you to know, to serve the Lord, you got to put some work in this. You know, in order to be a giver, how many know you got to give? And I know you never hear Brother Hay preaching about tithing and all that stuff. It's just not a big thing in my mind. But I know that it's part of God's word, and we do need to teach it. And here's one of the things I always tell people. You have to learn to be a giver. And you know what? You got to start somewhere. Even if you can't give all of it, you got to start somewhere. Because what I found out over the years, if you never start, you'll never be a giver. If you're going to learn to forgive and to love that enemy, all right, don't get mad at me. Don't throw rocks at Brother Hay. You got to start loving them. How hard is that? Man, it's so easy to get up here and teach. I love teaching, man. That's so easy. All I got to do is tell you what to do. And then after I leave here and I walk out, guess what? Then I got to put it into practice. Okay? Poor Tyler used to ride. I used to give him rides to school all the time. Poor guy used to have to ride with me 25, 30 minutes both ways. Guess what? It's bad to be in a car with a preacher all the time. And I used to tell him, I go, Tyler, it's okay. I never tried to be too preachy. But I tried to talk to him some. But not in a way where I was belittling him and all those kind of things. Because how many know that doesn't work either? So Brother Hay can get up here and tell you, well, if you don't love your enemy, you're not a Christian. That's not my call. But I will tell you, you won't be where you need to be in your walk with God if you don't do the hard stuff. You know, one of the things that gets me in trouble, and sometimes Tanya even gets mad at me over this one, we have a rule in our house. Brandon has to put his iPad and stuff up at 8 o'clock hour before he goes to bed. So Tanya usually goes lay down in there until he falls asleep. And last night, at time for him to go to sleep at 9, she's still playing her iPad. And I said, hey, that's not very fair. How did I know she was going to say that? I think I've been doing this a long time, Fred, and I already know some responses. Because Tanya don't always say she just responds, but I can tell you that's a response that most people have. Hey, life's not fair. That's his problem, not mine. I'm going to play my iPad. I'm not going to go over here and take time out and read God's word, right? I'm going to do what I want to. And then what ends up happening in your life, and I'm not trying to be preaching, I'm just being honest with you. If you don't get into God's word, you will struggle spiritually. If you don't put into practice the hard things. And you say, well, Brother Hay, what about people that, listen, rule number 1, forget what everybody else is doing. You're not responsible for them. You're responsible for you. And I remember whenever I made tech, it was so funny. because some of them guys were so mad. I mean, they were angry. And I'm like, I don't know what you're mad about. Now, it's not this way anymore. Back in the day, for every year of time in grade, believe it or not, we used to get a lot of points. We got 6 points for every year and 2 points for every time in service. So Brother Hay been in, for 6 years. So you add mine up. 6 times 8 is 48, right? The guy that was in charge had been in for 14 years, add his up. That guy had 100 points almost on me before. All he had to do was sign his name. But when we got our scores back, he got a 31 on both tests. And I thought, okay. And then don't get mad at me because I did the right thing. But here's the point. People will get upset with you when you do the right thing spiritually too. You got to understand that. You got to put a check mark there in your life and know that when you're doing the right thing, other people will do their best to pull you away from that. And you say, oh, brother, hey, people don't do that every day. One thing I know about as I gotten older and done a lot of things in my life and been around a lot, I can tell you human nature, I'm not like Brother Michael. I might not have a master's degree, but I have one of those degrees that come from life experience and from knowing people. So it's like when somebody wants to talk to me, I've only been married 5 years. I don't think I can make this work. And I'm looking at him going, I've been married 52 years. Yeah, you can make it work, but you got to make it work. Would you agree with me? If you always want the other person to make that work, it's not happening. But on the flip side of that, how many know that's the way life is? See, we've kind of got into this microwave thing, and it's one of those things that drive Brother Hay crazy. If people can't have it in 10 seconds, they really don't want it. And if you wonder what's even making it worse, I know Tanya and Kaylee get mad, but the iPads make it worse. And it's so funny because I've watched the little one, and sometimes if she gets a phone or something, she already knows. And she also knows she's already got those forehead movements down pretty good, right? And I'm laughing. And I think about that all the time. And it's real easy, once again, to throw rocks at somebody else, but how hard is it for you to put things into practice? A while back, Sister A told me, your memory's kind of slipping. I understand, getting old. And somehow she read somewhere where you're supposed to do those word things, right? Those little word puzzles. Okay, well, I'm not going to lie to you. Brother Hay is a pretty competitive guy. So when I get daily challenges like, hey, I have to do that, right? And if I get one of those, nope, I'm not quitting until I can get that. And one night I was sitting there, and I didn't realize how long I'd been doing those kind of things. And I'd been on my little phone there doing one of them puzzles for like 3 hours. And I went, whoa. But unlike some people that we're not going to mention, guess what Brother Hay did? When I realized I spent that much time, Fred, I went in there and deleted the app. And I'm sure they would have. I deleted the app. You know why, Brother Randy? Because it had me kind of fixated on something that was taken away from what I need to be doing. So I wasn't praying like I should have that night. I didn't read like I should have that night. And then I got to come in here and teach on Wednesday night. How many know that's not a good place to be? But I could tell you all the words that were in the puzzle. But here's Brother Hay's point. It costs you something to do the right thing. It will. Okay? I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Richard. I don't care if you're Donna and Michael or Brother Hay or whoever. I tell people everybody is the same thing. And a lot of times we're not willing to pay the price for what we need. So if I need some peace in my life, where am I going to go to get it? I promise you, I'm not going to Wells Fargo Bank. Because whatever they give me, I got to pay back. Fred, I might have peace for a little while until the bill comes due. And then all of a sudden, that Wells Fargo Bank, they're going to steal all the peace I got by getting that loan, right? And they're going to start adding to my stress and maybe make me distressed before it's over with, right? But here's what I can tell you. I learned a long time ago, there's nothing that can replace this. The other Sunday morning, we talked about Psalms 23 in Sunday school. People read that at funerals, and that's what we talked about, right, Brother Randy? But by the end of that Sunday school class, we all came to the same agreement. What if we started living Psalms 23 while we're still alive? Right? And put it into practice. All of a sudden, when you start thinking about what that psalm's teaching, yeah, I understand when we leave this world where we're going to be, but how many times are we overwhelmed and need Psalms 23 while we're here? Okay? I think about that all the time, and, you know, you can face up to giants, you can do all those things, you can be tough. I always think about this. Elisha is one of those prophets. The guy goes up against 450 prophets of Baal, and at the end of the day, he's running from a woman. Because that woman said, hey, I'm going to get you. And the guy's like, I'm out of here. I'm thinking, you're tough, you're strong, and you're all that, right? You know what happens when you have a big victory spiritually? You're vulnerable at that moment in time. And if you're not careful, the enemy will come and try and pick that thing that you just won and pluck it right out of your hand and pluck it out of your life. That's what he did to him. And I always think about him sitting down by the creek saying, oh, man, I'm the only one that's left and nobody else around. And God said, are you crazy or what? There's a whole bunch of people that haven't given in yet. And again, the enemy wants you to think you're alone. And here's Jesus in probably his hour of greatest need. And I always get a little bit aggravated about this because this is the part I hate to always even mention, but it's true. Those that were closest to him, think about this, walked away. When he needed them to pray, they didn't pray, Brother Randy. They went to sleep. When he needed them to be there for him. But here's what I got to tell you, and this is the good part. That's the sad part because people are like that, right? But let me give you the good part. Jesus never walked away from you. He saw that cross. He knew what it meant. He knew what he was going to have to do. And no matter what happened, Fred, he said, oh, man, I got to do this. It's the right thing. Even if nobody else stays there. And I know there's a lot of people who preach about poor Peter, and they beat him all up, and they go, hey, I would have never denied him. Yeah, right. Okay? It's funny how people can be brave, especially in a group, right? That's why I said even now in our country, and it's only been a week, we're already kind of seeing a shift where people are starting to say, hey, that stuff's wrong over there. We're not going to do that no more. Okay. Where were they 6 months ago? Where were they a year ago? Just being quiet and letting stuff go, right? Not taking a stand. And here's what I want to tell you. I promise you that I promise you that I promise you, when you take a stand, God will back you up. And at the end of the day, he's the one you need on your side. You know, Peter failed. We all know that. We all know he denied him 3 times. We know that Peter went so far as to say, hey, man, I'll die for you. Even when he whacked the guy's ear off. I always think that was funny. And you would think about this because here he is whacking the guy's ear off and Jesus puts it back on. Right? All them guys that were there, they had to know what happened. He didn't do it underneath a bushel or something. How many think they probably knew there was more going on there than met the eye? But here's where I get excited. Even though Peter walked away from him, Jesus never walked away from Peter. Right? He still was there, Fred. And what I want to give you encouragement tonight, even if you're struggling, if you're watching by YouTube and Facebook and those things, I want to tell you straight up, don't allow the enemy to ever convince you that Jesus has walked away from you. He doesn't do that. We push him away. We walk away from him. But Fred, he stands his ground. And over the years, one thing that I've learned is sometimes you got to stand up and you got to be careful. Brandon's going through that stage in life right now. And he told me the other day, I don't know if somebody's been bothering him or what. And he said, well, Papa, what am I supposed to do if somebody hits me? I said, whatever you do, try to avoid it getting so far where they hit you. Try to walk away before it gets to that point. But I had to tell him the truth. I had to tell him, but if they hit you and they're going to hurt you, you got to stand up for yourself, right? I know Christians aren't supposed to talk like that. But we are. Listen, out there in the world, when the world starts attacking us, at some point, we can try to walk away. We can try to work through those things. It's what we talked about in Sunday school this last week. God says, hey, come let us reason together. You can't reason with somebody that's not reasonable, right? And you can't let them bully you, right? And here's what I had to tell Brandon, though. I said, but you got to be careful. And he said, why, Papa? I said, because sometimes when you hit a bully, they hit back. Am I telling the truth? And sometimes Christians have this false idea in their head that somehow when you take a stand, that person's not going to retaliate. They will. But you better make sure you're listening to God and responding through him. Here's what I know for sure. God will always protect you. He'll always take care of you. And you know what? The worst they can do is take your life, but they can't take your soul. And I wish I could get people nowadays. I know people don't read books anymore. I got so many books, and I bet I'd give away 1,000. I still got a bunch I need to give away, and I almost hate to take them somewhere and to give them away because you know what ends up happening, Brother Rady? I know at some point they'll end up in a dumpster. I just know people just don't read books anymore. But I used to always keep a copy of this little book called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And I had it in paperback, and it's a pretty lengthy read, but I always tried to pass it out to new Christians. Lots of times I didn't get them back, so I always had to keep buying them. Can't hardly buy stuff like that anymore. But I go and find them a lot of times over at the Goodwill store and places like that. I used to love to do that. And I would suggest to anybody that's a Christian, we need to read that book. We don't think about the great heroes of our faith and some of the things people went through. And sometimes it cost them their life. And if you want an example from the Bible, let me just be real quick. Stephen gave his life for what he believed in, for doing the right thing. And we all know that Jesus, who was supposedly sitting down at the right hand of the Father, all of a sudden he changed his position. How many are glad he did? The Bible said all of a sudden he's standing up. I believe with all my heart, Fred, he reached down and grabbed a hold of him and welcomed him into heaven. And we got to remember that sometimes to serve God, it costs. Now, most cases, people never have to go that far. But we do need to not be afraid to live our faith. And we're almost done. We only got a few minutes, about 5 more minutes, but I want you to think about something. If you got to tell somebody you're a Christian, you need to check how you're living. I'm just saying. Over the years, that's Brother Hayes' number one pet peeve. Okay? Putting it in a military perspective or in Brother Randy's case, a management perspective where he worked, and Larry, if he's a leaderman somewhere when he was working, or Fred, when you had your job, if you had to go tell the people that worked for you that you were the boss, you're already lost. You're not the boss. You're just not the boss. Just take it from Brother Hay. You know what? People either going to respect you or they're not. If you don't act like a boss, how many know they don't respect you? How many know if you're playing favorites, let somebody come in late because they're your friend, and then yell at somebody else or a family member, and you yell at somebody else for doing the very same thing? How many know you have zero respect from everybody? Period, end of story. How many know if you do the right thing as a boss, people will know? And you don't have to get in an argument with them. And I've used that story a million times about us getting a new officer and him letting me know that all those guys worked for him. I'm like, okay. And he wanted to go ask them who they worked for. I already knew what was going to happen. Okay? Technically, they worked for him. He was the major. Barry was just the sergeant, right? What he didn't know is I was there when some of them got divorced. I was there when some of them lost things. I was there when they went through stuff. I was there when we worked 12-hour shifts. I was there whenever things were bad. I was there when we were being away from our families and doing all those things. Burhay was with them, okay? How many know you get a bond? You just do. And I knew when he went out there, I knew he was going to get his feelings hurt. And when he went out there and he asked them who they worked for, and they looked him right in the eye and said, him, I knew that guy was so mad at me for a long time. But here's Brother Hayes' point. If you got to tell somebody you're the boss, you're not. If you got to tell somebody you're a Christian, you're not. You might be saved. You might be filled with the Holy Spirit. You might be on your way to heaven. But if you're not living your life the way you should, you can wear a sign that says, hey, I'm a Christian. And they're going to look at you like, really? Right? And what Brother Hay is saying is we got to quit being secret agents for God. That's always drove me crazy. I don't ever run around and put a sign on me, Fred, that says, hey, I'm a Christian. When Brother Hay was the pastor, I never put a sign on me that said, hey, I'm a pastor. I still would never do something like that. But all of a sudden, people kind of figure things out. If you all of a sudden, when you're in the middle of Walmart and somebody's struggling and you see them, you go, hey, let me pray for you. All of a sudden, they begin to think there's something weird about you. I'm okay being weird. I just want you to know that. But you know what? At the end of the day, Brother Randy, I don't have to wear the sign. And in closing, I want you to think about the one phrase that drives Brother Hay crazy. As soon as I start to say it, Donna's going to know what it is. Randy will know. Some of you haven't been around me enough yet. You will pick up on this. I hate this phrase, what would Jesus do? Y'all remember when everybody wore those? The hats, the armbands, right? The T-shirts. Yeah, I don't know about rings. I don't get that deep into stuff. But, hey, here's Brother Hayes saying, every time I would see one of those, it would drive me crazy. Do you know why? I know what Jesus would do. That's not the question. The question is, what are you going to do? Right? When we're talking about doing the hard stuff, Jesus died for the very ones that were crying, crucify him. Think about that. Jesus was up there praying, and the rest of the church was down there sleeping. I always have this vision. I know it's, Brother Hayes, weird. It's okay. You can think I'm weird if you want. Okay? You can tell people online, too, if you want to pass that on, because I said I was weird. It's fine. Sometimes I just want you to think about it. I think a lot of times the church is down here sleeping. while Jesus is up there praying for us. Am I telling the truth? God's word said that he is making intercession for you and me. And a lot of Christians are down here doing this. Sound asleep. Right? And all of a sudden we wonder why we don't see miracles. We wonder why we don't see people filled with the baptism of the Holy Spirit like we need. We wonder why we don't see people getting saved. How many think we got to wake up? And I know it's always easier to wake the other person up. Now in our house it's different. Nobody wakes up Sister Hay. Brandon's 10 years old. He's already got that down to a science. The other night, he went to bed. He didn't want to take his shower. I told him he had to. His nan told him he could wait till in the morning. I was like, oh. Anyway, I lost. But I told him, I said, I'm not waking you up, so you better set your alarm. I was being kind of hard on him, and I figured I was going to have to go in there and get him right. 5:45, Fred, I heard his little alarm going beep, beep, beep. I said, all right, I'm going to get to teach this boy a lesson. He got up out of bed and went and got in the shower. And he fooled me. Wouldn't it be great if we did that with Jesus once in a while? Just once in a while. He didn't have to come and say, hey, wake up. Hey, get up and pray with me for a minute. And we just set our little alarm, Fred, and we got up and we did the right thing. How cool would that be, right? How many think the church would be better? Okay? I think it would. Donna, if you want to turn that off, we'll go ahead and pray. If you do have offering, you can just put it in the basket. Look around and see all the ones that are usually part of our regular Wednesday night crowd. Try to call them. How many know, Brother Hay, I'll try to remember. But if you're counting on my memory, that's why Sister Hay had me doing word games. It's not as good as it used to be. But if you would stand with me, we'll pray. I'm glad you're here tonight. And I appreciate you. I want you to know that. I think every one of you are important. And listen, this isn't about whether or not you're being 100% what you need to be. I haven't met a person yet that is. But how many know we need to strive to be better? Remember, don't matter who walks away, you keep walking. It doesn't matter who's not doing something, you do what you need to do. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be in your house. Lord, first and foremost, I ask that you wrap your arms around each one that's here. Lord, I pray that somehow the word that was taught here tonight, that was given, will find a place in our hearts. Lord, you promised that your word would never return void. God, I pray that it would go forth and do something great. And Father, I pray most of all, let each one that's here know that you love them and you're walking with them.